With Election Day less than 2 months away, tonight we are bringing together the 5 candidates for Portland's top job to debate the issues that are most important to you.
We are looking everywhere. We want to figure it out, and we want your help.
With an exploding unhoused population, dozens of refugees arriving, and an extremely tight housing market, Portland's next mayor faces major challenges from day one.
People just trying to exist.
It's your voice and your future. CBS 13 helping you decide the next mayor of Portland. Our debate starts right now. Hello and welcome to the CBS 13 Bangor Daily News Portland mayoral debate. I am Greg Lagerquist. We're going to be hearing from these candidates in just a moment. In fact, you're going to be hearing a lot from them. First, though, I'm pleased to welcome in my colleague, the political editor of the BDN, Mike Shepard, who's going to be joining me and asking some of the questions here tonight. And great to have you here again, once again, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me, Greg.
All right, let's have a quick word now on the format. Each candidate's going to have roughly 1 minute to answer each of these questions. That'll be followed by some discussion, follow-up questions as well. It's going to be a 1-hour debate airing online the entire time. The first half of this debate airing right here on CBS 13. We also had a random drawing to determine the order in which these candidates would appear and answer questions. Let's get right to it. Let's go ahead and meet the candidates. Again, based on that random drawing, we're going to start with Dylan Pugh. You have roughly 30 seconds, please.
Thank you, Greg. Hi, everyone. I'm Dylan Pugh. I use he, him pronouns, and it's really great to be with you tonight. Portland's a really special place to me. It's a place that I've called home for almost 10 years now, and it's the first place that I've felt like I've had the kind of support that I need. It's allowed me to grow into the person I am today, and that's why I'm running for mayor, to give back to the community and the people that have given me so much over the years. So thanks for being here. I'm excited to get into it.
Dylan Pugh, thank you so much. Mark Dion, your chance too, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in tonight. This is an important debate as you make your decision as to who Portland's next mayor will be. I've served you for 45 years as a deputy police chief, a sheriff, a state representative, and a senator, and I'll sit on the city council. I hope tonight you will hear my answers and that I will earn your vote as Portland's next mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark Dion. Pius Ali, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Pius Ali. 23 years ago, exactly this month, I made a decision to travel to the U.S. I migrated here, live in New York. 2 years later, I ended up in Portland. Portland is a special place. It has many things that are working, but we also have many challenges. And because of those challenges, I have been on the school board for 3 years, served on the city council for 7 years. I'm the current longest serving city councilor. And I'm here to work with all of you so that we can tackle the challenges that our city is facing. And we'll also work together collaboratively to make sure that we continue to create an environment that attract many people to come to our city and that improve the lives of the community that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Justin Costa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for hosting us this evening. My name is Justin Costa. I'm running for mayor of Portland because I believe that Portland needs a change. This is a special community, but we are also facing a very unique set of challenges. And for the last several years, I think many of us have watched as our city council has struggled to translate broad themes like affordable housing, homelessness, education, into real policies and real results that help the citizens of Portland better their lives. I've served on the city council, I've served on the school board, I got things done in both offices, and I will get things done as your mayor.
Thank you very much. Andrew Zaro, to you, please.
Thank you, Greg. Good evening, Portland. My name is Andrew Zaro, and I'm running for mayor of Portland. I was a small business owner in Portland for 6 years, where I worked closely with people every day over a cup of coffee and learned about what matters most to them. That in part inspired me to run for the city council, where for the last 3 years I've worked diligently to make my constituents' lives better. I'm running for mayor because we have significant challenges facing our city, from housing and homelessness to climate and affordability. I believe we need a leader with the vision, passion, and experience to tackle these issues head on. I believe I am that person. I represent a new generation of leadership, and I really look forward to talking with you all tonight.
All right, thank you so much for hearing from the candidates. Let's go ahead and jump into the question. The first one involves the role of mayor. Last year, there was a vote where the voters of Portland rejected a city charter amendment that would have strengthened the role of mayor. First of all, before we get into it, can I have a show of hands? How many of you supported that charter amendment to strengthen the role of mayor? One. And how many of you opposed that charter amendment to strengthen the role of mayor? Three. And Councilor Ali, I see you didn't raise your hand.
Right.
Are you choosing to not say yay or nay?
Well, what
It's your choice, by the way.
No, I will say where I stood. During this thing, what I said is that.
Actually, hold on just a second, because I think we're going to get to it. It will come right back to you in a moment, because we're going to get right to the exact question we're going to ask. For that, I want to send it over to my colleague, Mike Shepard. He's going to ask our first question here tonight as a follow-up to what we were just talking about.
Yeah, under the charter, the mayor now is more of a spokesperson than an executive, setting goals for the council while the manager runs day-to-day operations. How would you lead under these constraints? We'll start with you, Dylan Pugh.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, I did vote for the strong mayor because I felt things needed to change, but I'm very comfortable with the role of the mayor as it is now. And the way that I would step into that, I think, is twofold. I think it's the mayor's job to model, when talking to constituents, the kind of vulnerable, deep conversations that we need to have to cut through the division and the divisiveness that we experience right now. So that's the mayor's first and most sacred duty, is to do that. And the second part is to lead a process by which we take that model of communication and scale it up to the city. So that's the city institutions, whether it's the city council or the committees or the way the city government runs. And so I consider that the mayor's job is to use this kind of conversation to understand the people's hopes and dreams and their concerns, and to stay laser focused on that, and to bring those and translate those to policy positions and work within the government and the council to really honor those positions and get things done.
Thanks, Mark Dyer.
Mark Dyer, to you, please.
Thank you. Listen, the mayor's job is to speak for the city. It's to be an advocate for the city. It's to take on interests that would impact our best interests. Also, it acts as a collaborator with the city manager to make sure that office is in sync with the wishes of the council. And the less known part of the mayor, but equally important, is to set the agenda and help shape the vision of the council so it can get its work done. So you manage the council, you fight for Portland in whatever arena presents itself, specifically the legislature, and you act as an advocate for the people. Remember, it is all the voters of Portland that make a decision about mayor, and I intend to make sure their voices are heard in council chambers.
And Pius, I'll lead to you, and I'll give you some extra time, because again, to respond to what you wanted to a moment ago.
Right. Thank you very much. I think the role of the mayor, as it's enshrined in the charter right now, the mayor is a facilitator. The mayor is a convener. The mayor is a leader, not a politician. The mayor is someone who is able to bring, we live in a time where we have divisions, so we need a mayor who is a collaborator and who will be able to, I see it as a true legate still. One is the council, the other is the manager's office, and the other one is the public. The mayor should be an individual who is able to create collaboration, understanding, and a smooth working environment for all these three legs of the stool. And I believe I'm that mayor, and I'm looking forward to being that.
Thank you so much. Justin Costa, your chance to answer first before we go to discussion.
Yeah, Greg, I think the job of the mayor is to be the head of the city government and to help work with the legislative body, which is the city council, to make sure that the city's efforts are organized and that there is consistent progress towards addressing the goals, even if people disagree about how we get to those goals. It's to work in partnership with city staff and make sure that policies that are being passed are being implemented. There is a clear delineation of roles within the charter, but fundamentally it's a partnership. And I served on the council for a bit under Mayor Brennan, under Mayor Snyder, and under Mayor Strimling. And I have the experience of seeing what didn't work for each of those. And it's fundamentally about building a positive relationship with the city manager. For someone like me, I've known the city manager for a long time and already have that relationship. And I'm certainly not unique in that regard. But the job is to be that facilitator and make sure that the government is coordinated as much as possible.
All right, let's hear from Andrew Zarro as well before we go to discussion.
The joy of going last right now. So I agree with a lot of what was said tonight, but I think what's really important is the mayor's role in our current form of government is to hold the council accountable alongside being that bridge builder with city staff and the community. I mean, the mayor works closely with the manager on setting the agenda, and that's where vision really comes in and understanding what the people of Portland want and how they're going to enact that in council goals. I personally think that the way our government works right now requires a lot of personality. It requires someone who's willing to roll up their sleeves and do the work every single day with the 8 other people who sit on the city council, with city staff, and the people who put them in their seats. So personally, I think that a strong mayor overall, the concept was appealing, but I think when you look at a city of our size and what our economies of intimacy that allow us to get things done by knowing each other and trusting each other, I believe that our current structure of government allows our mayor to be really effective if they are opting into working closely with the other parties on the council.
And I want to move on to something else, but I first want to go to Mike Shepard. He has a follow-up for us.
Just for Piacelli, I wanted to nail you down. You were the only one on the stage that didn't say how they voted on question 2, the strong mayor question last year. How did you vote on that question?
How did I voted on that question? I don't think I remember exactly how I voted, but I can explain what my position was at that time.
You don't remember how you voted on the position of the role you're running for right now?
Yes, I don't.
Okay.
But go ahead and explain your position, sir.
Yeah, my position was at that time, what I said when I was asked by the press was that I believe that the people of Portland, I can work with either way because of the way I do my work. If it's a strong mayor, I was still on the council, and I will continue to be on the council. If it's the one that we have now, I will be able to work on that. So I didn't weigh in when there was the public conversation when I was asked. I said to the press, I think it can be verified in an interview that I gave Press Herald, that whatever the majority of Portland decide, I'm open and willing to work with it.
All right, thank you so much. And we're going to move on to our next topic here. I appreciate the good discussion we've had so far. Let's talk about the homelessness crisis. Obviously, we can't avoid that issue here tonight. One of the city's biggest, most visible problems right now is the homelessness crisis. Both the city and the state have recently dismantled some of the encampments that have been around in Portland. Often, though, that just moves people from one encampment to another. What does a solution look like here? Again, I want to dive into what you think can help fix this. And again, rotating who starts the questions. We're going to start this one with Mark Daya.
It's got to end. That's simple. Right now, we have an effort that represents a partnership between social services and our fire service. And it's a social worker approach. And there is a value to that if people want to accept the services. I cannot tolerate the idea that we provide them a menu of options and they come up with conditions. So here's my response to that. If you want conditions, I want rules. I want the police involved. I want to curtail open and notorious criminal conduct. I want to recover stolen property. I want the same level of normalcy in those camps that I would expect from anybody else that was camping in a public space. I want to make our public spaces, our parks and our trails safe again. People don't want to talk about it because they don't think it's politically correct. So I will advocate on their behalf. I want this city safer in 4 years than we feel it is today. And the encampments have to cease. We have to get people into housing. If you're drowning, it's not time to argue about what color life preserver I'm going to throw to you. Take it and we can deal with those consequences after. Thank you.
And we're going to hear from everyone before we have discussion. Piacelli, your chance to answer the same question.
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes, certainly. Right now, the state and the city have started to dismantle some of the homeless encampments around the city. Often that's just led to people being displaced to another encampment. What's your solution here to maybe a longer-term solution to this crisis?
Thank you very much. I think we need to look at it through the lens of compassion. Using punitive will not work. Why am I saying that? I categorize the individuals that we have out there into 3 groups. One group is the person, the individual who is facing a hard time in their life. That group, what they need is a little bit of help to put them into housing and give them the social support that they need. We have a second group who, it doesn't matter where you put them, the landlord will say, do this, don't do this, don't do this, do this, and they will violate all of that. They will organize parties. After 3 months, they will be out on the street. And we have a third group that are having extensive mental health issues and substance use. For that group, we need to figure out, partner with the state to figure out how can we put a program, a very extensive, intensive program that will support them in a housing environment where they get the support that they need. I used to work with an organization called Volunteers of America that used to do things like that, and I've seen it work. And if we partner with many others, it will work again. And soon our streets will be safe and people will get the help that they need.
Thank you very much. Justin Costa, your chance for the same question, please.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear as a city that we need to begin to wind down the encampments. These are fundamentally not safe, and we have to follow the facts where they lead us, as uncomfortable as that can be sometimes. What we're doing right now is not a humane way to treat the homeless. We are putting an extremely vulnerable population in more danger than they need to be. And we're not doing anything for the citizens that are near the encampments who are directly affected by it, which includes members of my family who have been personally accosted trying to walk through city parks. We can't accept that. What the city is attempting to do right now, and HHS Director Kristen Dow is attempting to do right now, I think is a compassionate approach to try to match individuals with services to the maximum extent that is possible. I think the truth of the matter, though, and what we have to come to grips with, is that it's built on a shaky foundation, and it's built on a shaky foundation for two reasons. One, we really need to rebuild the partnerships that we have with nonprofits in the community who provide a whole array of services to individuals experiencing homelessness. The second is simply that the city was very late to respond to the initial encampment as it started to grow on the Bayside Trail, and that has made it exponentially more difficult to deal with the situation today.
Thank you very much. Andrew Zara, the same question to you, please.
Thank you. I agree entirely. We do need to tackle our homelessness issue head on. But what we're looking at right now and experiencing in real time is decades of inaction playing out. We have three crises that are overlapping. We have a housing crisis, we have a mental health crisis, and we have a substance abuse crisis. And I want to be really careful not to paint a broad brushstroke to say that there is a monolith of the type of unhoused person that exists. Yes, there is a lot of overlap, but I think we have an obligation to understand what folks are going through when they are our unhoused neighbors. The good news is there's a lot we can do about it. Other cities are doing this across the country. There are 3 lanes of housing. There is emergency housing, so like our homeless services shelter, that's at capacity. There's transitional housing, which we have a very limited amount of. Then there's permanent housing. We have emergency shelter. We know the data shows that emergency shelter will not solve this on its own. I have a proposal to prioritize transitional housing coupled with housing first policies to remove the remaining barriers that folks do have to getting housing. We know that if someone has an address, they're more likely to get employment. They're more likely to go and attend continuing education. If they have a partner, they can't go to emergency housing. They have to separate. If they have a dog, right? And I understand some of these issues might seem trivial to people who are housed, but these really are significant barriers. And so I think we should prioritize 100 units of transitional housing. We have money that can pay for it that's not going to affect the tax dollars of Portlanders. And it's going to move the needle. But inaction is not going to solve this problem. This is one of the biggest issues of our city and of our time.
Thank you so much. And Dylan Pugh, last but not least, your chance to answer the same question, please.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that on a basic level, the solution to homelessness is housing. And obviously we have a housing shortage right now. And I think we need to be really careful about thinking about the kind of housing that we're going to build. So we obviously have the emergency shelter and the transitional housing. But I think housing first, like Andrew said, is really the right way to go. If you give somebody a house, a door that they can lock, a place where they can feel safe, everything is going to follow from that. And that's the compassion approach that Pius mentioned as well. So I don't think it's fair for us to assume that people that are refusing to go to the shelter are doing that out of ill will. Oftentimes people don't feel safe there, and we need to prioritize the safety of everyone in Portland, including our unhoused neighbors. And the issue with this is that once people are in a housing first situation, then the wraparound services can come as well. So you can have people that get help with mental illness, with substance abuse. But without that stability, nothing else is going to be nearly as effective.
And as part, if I could, we had, obviously these are human beings, first and foremost, who are in these encampments. We have heard, though, from some members of the business community, particularly in the Old Port, saying that they feel there should be an increased police presence. If I could have a show of hands, how many of you have spoken with business community members down in the Old Port and would support continuing police presence in those areas? A show of hands, yes. Okay, so universal at that point. You support that. Mike, did you have a follow-up that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, city officials here have wanted Governor Janet Mills and the state to take a more active role in managing services for the hundreds of asylum seekers who have come here in recent months. Do you all agree with that? And if so, what more does Portland need? I think we start here with Pius Ali.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're sort of wrapping in the homelessness issue, obviously, and asylum seekers. Obviously, they dovetail. They're separate issues, but dovetail as well. Pius Ali, your chance to begin, please.
I think what Governor Mills is doing is she's following the footsteps of, I think, 16 or 17 other states who have created the Office of New Americans. And what that office will do is lift the burden off Portland and frame the conversation about the asylum seekers and other immigrants who are coming to our beautiful city and state into looking at them as assets instead of liability. They will create opportunities for these groups to become part of the society, to be part of the state that we live in. And they will lift the burden of Portland being the only one that is shouldering it. Because currently, all the asylum seekers are coming here, and I think there's a state law, once someone gets into your city and apply for GA, you are responsible for that. The state have given us a lot of support, and I hope that they will continue to give us that support so that we will help the people who are here. Most of them are educated, most of them are looking forward to work. What the Office of New Americans will do is it will connect with other Office of New Americans across the state to advocate at federal level, so that the amount of time that these individuals have to wait before they get the work authorization is lowered to the level that once someone gets here within the shortest possible time, because they want to work, that is why they are here. Within the shortest possible time, they will get back to work and they will become members of our society. They don't have to rely on us to take care of them. But for now, we have to do that until we get them back to work.
Thank you very much. Justin Costa, the same question to you, please.
Yeah, I do think it's important to emphasize that asylum seekers are a tremendous benefit for the community at large. They tend to be just incredibly dedicated people. I've had the privilege of meeting a number of people seeking asylum over the years. They are put in an impossible situation by the confluence of federal law, where we welcome them into the country, then prevent them from working. So I have been very proud to work on a number of issues related to asylum seekers in my time in office. I helped create the Community Support Fund that housed roughly 1,000 asylum seekers when Governor LePage was trying to strip them of housing assistance in 2015. The city built the Office of Economic Opportunity, which was geared towards job skills training and a variety of other programs aimed at asylum seekers. But we also have to be clear that Portland can't do everything. There are 1,600 individuals, and next to a population of 67,000 in a city, we are going to have issues, and that's what we're seeing right now. So I think to answer the question, we certainly need more support from the state to make sure that Portland is not the only municipality helping to deal with the arrival of asylum seekers, and it shouldn't be a problem against a population of 1.3 million statewide.
Thank you very much. Andrew Zaro, same question to you, please.
Thank you. I want to be intentional with this as well, to recognize that asylum seekers and new Mainers are a very different group when speaking of our other unhoused neighbors. Different needs, different services, but we should be looking at this as an opportunity. Maine is the oldest state in the country. We have an aging population. We have a declining population in a lot of cities and towns. So this is a wonderful opportunity for new people who want to come here, who want to work here. They want to start a business. They want to bring their expertise as well. And they do have a lot of barriers when it comes to employment. 6 months is best case scenario, but that's federal law. It's a little bit above Portland's pay grade. But we are lucky enough to have a wonderful delegation that works closely with us on focusing on prioritizing fixing that so folks can get work authorization sooner than later. But right now we are dealing with a serious issue. Over 60% of the folks who are at the homeless services shelter, because it's a first come first served shelter, are asylum seekers. So the council is currently working on building a new facility with specific services for asylum seekers, because we want to welcome them into the community. Portland is the biggest city in the state of Maine. It makes sense that people are coming here.
I'm going to have to cut you off there because we're running out of time on the televised portion of it. I want to get to Dylan Pugh, please, and we'll come back to you in a moment.
Sure, thanks.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we need an all-hands-on-deck approach. You're talking state level, federal level, because as people have said up here, this is not an issue that's unique to Portland, and I want to be clear that I also think that asylum seekers are an enormous asset to our community, and we have a responsibility when we welcome people in to provide the services and provide the pathway into integration that they expect. So I think that we need to be very serious about what are the barriers here, and one that's been mentioned that I agree with is this work authorization. And I think we need to be leaders in figuring out how can we shorten that, how can we get rid of it, maybe. And if we need to get a little messy with it, let's have that conversation and get some pushback.
I want to come back to you in a moment. Mark Diane, we have only about 50 seconds left in the televised portion. The floor is yours.
Listen, every answer I've heard this evening about social challenges requires policies that'll take a couple years or more to realize. I think the citizens of Portland want answers tomorrow. They want action tomorrow. Governor, I need you to come fully square with the city of Portland and take an active leadership role to provide us resources outside process, outside typical procedure, so first we can house all the immigrant families that are here. We need to talk about how we can relocate them to other communities that might have the capacity in terms of housing so they can enter those economies as well. I think the city of Portland deserves a governor that will come out and not just say, I have an office of immigration and new immigrants. What, 2 people? I need a team of coordinators to help these cities deal with this problem, and I want strategies that we can realize in months rather than years.
Thank you very much, Mark Diane. We're going to have more time with Dylan Pugh, Mark Diane, and continue this conversation online. The conversation's rolling. You can scan the QR code on your screen as well to go to WGME.com or BDN.com, BangorDailyNews.com. That's it on air. We'll continue online. We'll see you back here later tonight. Now, we are still online, folks. Take a sip of water. We are live for our viewers online. Thank you so much to those who have been with us on Facebook, on the Bangor Daily News website, our website at WGME.com. We've obviously moved off of CBS 13, the televised portion, but we want to continue the conversation for another half an hour ago. Let's pick up right here. I want to go back to Dylan Pugh because I appreciate you taking my signals there that we were up against the clock and we wanted to make sure that we heard at least from everybody for a bit here. Let's turn it back to you because I think you had a thought you were trying to finish when it comes to the asylum seeker crisis.
Absolutely. Thank you, Greg. Yeah, I mean, my thought is that I really want to see Portland be a leader on this. And we're going to have to take the leadership role and invent some things that might not exist on a national level. Because I think that you're right. You can't wait around for people at the federal or the state level to act when we have a clear crisis on the ground. And I think the issue that we have to be clear about is that this is not going to go away. We are only going to see an increase with asylum seekers, especially with the climate crisis pressurizing the global environment. Portland is already a haven for people, but it's going to become an even bigger one, and we should embrace that as an honor and a responsibility.
And I think we have some follow-ups from Mike Shepard, please.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to Mark Diane. You've been in the legislature. You just made a pretty clear call for more resources. I just wanted you to get a little more specific about what you want from the governor and the administration.
Well, I think the administration has the capacity to coordinate through their own MEMA, their Emergency Management Administration, so we can gather available resources across the state, have a central reallocation point so that we can provide housing where it's necessary. Here's our problem right now in Portland. Everyone is coming here, and this is a hard truth, but we're running out of capacity, financial capacity and staff capacity to manage this condition. So I'm calling on the legislature and the governor to free up resources that wouldn't typically be used in this, whether it's members of public safety, Health and Human Services at the state level, and send in crisis teams. Actually, I should call it a condition team because a point was made here that I agree with. A crisis has a timeline that's visible in terms of an endpoint. There is no endpoint right now. This is a condition, and the fact that this has devolved to a municipal challenge and has not been fully throated, adopted by state government as their primary responsibility is something I intend to advocate for as mayor.
Further discussion? Pius Ali, please.
I just want to add it. I want to add that I appreciate what the governor have done so far, because having the Office of New American, what they will do is this afternoon I was in a meeting with a lot of community members and someone from that office, which includes people from the immigrant community, having a conversation on what do we need to do to support you. And from what I heard today, they are going to be up and running in January. And it is not an office for 1 or 2 people. It's an office that will combine people from the governor's office and then people from the immigrant community who have a first-hand experience on how and what is needed so that they can share that and we will move on. And so we, as an immigrant who works closely with immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees and direct immigrants here, I think it's a good direction, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Justin Costa, follow up to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. I do just have to point out for the viewers who are still with us that there was a time when the city faced a very similar situation where we were successful in actually getting results. It was in 2015, and because of the work that Mayor Brennan and Councilor David Brennerman and I did, we succeeded. We didn't just talk about it. We kept 800 to 1,000 people from being thrown on the streets by Governor LePage because we knew how to manage the relationships and work with Augusta to secure additional funds that flowed into the city of Portland, and we used those to offset other costs and ultimately keep the people that we are talking about housed. We have been successful before, and we can do it again if we have the right leadership.
Mark Diane, the other comments you wanted to make?
Listen, I got to say this, Justin. We're housing over 1,200 people a night. A lot of them are immigrants. We haven't failed in our responsibility. These counselors that are standing here with me have met that charge. The history of immigration in Portland began in the late 70s into the 80s from Southeast Asia. But what was different then, there were sponsor families that were coordinated that received immigrants into their own home and provided that immediate support tomorrow. All right? In terms of what you did, fine. The scale of the problem has grown exponentially now, and it requires the state to step in. This cannot continue to be a municipal issue. We have to have an active partner that declares emergency resources for us to deal with this. We can't slide by on this one, Greg. We've got to do something different, something that's bold, and maybe something outside the rules. I'd rather it not be popular if it's the right thing to do. And right now, we're all trying to be polite to the state government, and it's time to call it out.
Andrew Zara wanted to respond to some of that and speak on his own
Thank
right
you.
as well.
I appreciate it. You know, I agree with a lot of what I'm hearing because I do think there is a sense of frustration that we're seeing in the city of Portland right now, and that's because we are beyond capacity. And I agree that in previous times, Portland has met the moment. There's a lot of differences for right now, though. A lot of that has to do with affordable housing. And access to housing, right? We have a significant deficit of housing right now, and I hope we do get to talk about that tonight. But this can't just fall on Portland. This is a regional issue. This is a state issue. This is a federal issue. And Portland is always good at punching above its weight class, but at this point, right now, we are just shuffling people around, and that's why we need a comprehensive policy. We do need to hold our state delegation accountable and call the governor's administration in to work closely with us because we're not going to succeed on our own. They are our greatest partner, and so I invite them to come here, and let's figure it out together because right now we have people who are in significant need, and we're trying our absolute best as a municipality, but this is far greater than the city of Portland's responsibility.
Piacelli, you wanted to add, and I want to move on, but please respond.
I just want to say that as someone who is a little bit one step closer to this conversation, I think the state government and the governor have taken a first step towards doing what my colleagues here are saying that they should do. And I'm looking forward to continue working with them to make sure that the resources that we need is provided so that the individuals who are coming to Portland and will continue to come to Portland have the support that they need as they integrate into our society.
Thank you so much. And now that we're online, I wanted to ask a question that frankly involves being online. Over the last few years since the pandemic, a lot of meetings have gone to hybrid or Zoom or online. You can probably see where this is going. Many of you were there, several of you were there for this meeting last night in Portland, which was interrupted by somebody spewing hate speech and that sort of thing. This is not the first time it's happened in Portland. It's not the first time it's happened in Maine. It's happened in other communities. I want to get a response from all of you. How would you deal with this issue? Now, obviously, you're all going to condemn it. What do you do about it? Is it time to end the hybrid meetings? What's next? Let's go ahead and start with Justin Costa, if we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to listen to the IT experts that are managing this process, and if it can't be stopped, then yeah, I mean, the unfortunate result is that we're going to have to end the hybrid meeting model if we can't prevent this from continuing to happen. It's an unfortunate circumstance, obviously, but public comment is there for members of the community of Portland to come and address their elected officials, and I think it's been very clear for some time that that is completely being abused. And we do have an obligation. I think the mayor and the council are certainly trying to do the right thing to shield members of the community from hate speech from people that really aren't trying to legitimately make public comment. So yeah, I think it has to be on the table.
Andrew Zara, and again, I believe you were present for that meeting last night.
I was for last night, and this has actually been going on for quite some time. Unfortunately, it's something that I am quite used to with my colleagues as well. Here's what's happening. There is a concerted effort in cities across the country, school boards across the country, for people to try to undermine our ability as elected government to do our job. And that, for me, will stop, because that is the public square. City Hall is the people's house, and anyone who tries to go there and undermine work that we're doing as elected officials, or undermine my constituents' ability to go and speak on their business as they're entitled to do, that is not okay. So for me, and I'm someone who, as a chair of Rules Committee 2 years ago, supported moving our public comment to the beginning of the meeting to increase accessibility, I take this very seriously, and I believe what we need to do immediately is stop remote participation until we figure out in-house what our next steps are. Other cities are doing pre-registration. I recognize that there are people who can't come into chambers. They have a disability, or they're going right from their job to cook dinner and hang out with their kids, and they want to give public comment on something that matters. That's important, and there are ways for us to figure that out. But what I will not stand for is for people to undermine our government and impede our ability as electeds to do our business. That is extremely important for me, and I will hold the line as mayor.
Thank you very much. And Dylan Pugh, the same question to you about how to stop it or what to do about it.
Absolutely. First I would just say that we obviously have to condemn this in the strongest possible terms. If anyone watching has not seen these comments, I urge you to go watch them. They're frankly shocking, and it was more extreme than I was expecting. So that has to stop immediately. And if we're going to close off Zoom, then I support that. The really challenging thing here is that we have to recognize this as part of a greater pattern. And I grew up in Eastern Washington, about 30 minutes from Idaho. So I've been dealing with right-wing white separatists for basically my whole life. And the really challenging thing is that we're seeing that in Maine right now. If you look up north, there are people that are buying land to create a compound who want to create a white ethno-state. So similar to the migrant crisis, this is a problem that is not unique to Maine, and it's something that we have to get ahead of. And the really challenging part about this is we have to think about, why do we lose people to these horrible, hateful ideologies? I don't believe anyone is born with hate in their heart. I don't think anyone grows up wanting to be a Nazi. But somewhere along the line, we lose these people. And often what happens is we lose them because they are economically disadvantaged. And these people feel disenchanted with the system, they feel like they've been betrayed, and then they are susceptible to propaganda. So we need to stop the behavior right now, say it's totally unacceptable, but we also need to make sure that we don't have the economic conditions that foster extremism going forward.
Thank you very much. Mark Dians, the floor is yours, please.
It was despicable what happened at the meeting last in terms of language expressed. And I'm at a loss as to why we always have to medicalize criminal conduct. They went right to that edge. And if I had my way, we'd prosecute them. Those assaults were not just directed at Councilor Zaro or the mayor or Councilor Fournier and Phillips and others, Pelletier. They were an attack on the communities they represent. I want to underscore that. It was an act of community terrorism. At the same time, I've served in state, county, and now local government. The unique feature of local government is the degree of public participation that we welcome. And I don't want to submerge that to those individuals. So I agree with a suspension on Zoom participation. I'll be advocating to the council that we find a manner in which text communications by Zoom viewers could be accepted by the council. That way we don't have to read into the record the filth that's been expressed behind the black curtain of a Zoom screen, but we can support and receive communications from those who may not be able to be in person, and at still time create a record of their wishes and opinions for the council to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. And Piacelli, finally to you, please.
Some of us on the council, not just here in Portland, but across the country, stepping up to serve our community, to serve the public, to serve the cities and the state that have given so much to us, is an act of courage. Because even before we sit on the seats that we sit to make decisions and represent our communities, we receive hate mails. I have a folder with hate mails in them. Long before we had COVID, long before we went to, have a hybrid meeting. So to some extent, as Councillor Zaro said earlier, you get somewhere where you don't get used to it because you enjoy it. You get used to it because you know that it doesn't matter what you do. They may not come out publicly. They will still send you emails. They will still send you text messages. Last night was I don't even have the right word to describe what night was to me and others on the council and my two colleagues who are here with me. However, I do believe that we need to tackle it. We need to find a way to talk to our corporation council so that we walk the thin line of allowing public participation, which I think is good because over the past 3 years, because of the pandemic, the participation in our process have increased. More than 100%. More people are taking part, more people are reaching out to us because they can sit in their living room and participate in our meetings and give public comment. Other places across the country are doing it. We need to look and see what have worked somewhere and then adopt it.
Thank you so much. I want to move on. I almost hate even indirectly to give this the time of day, but I think it's present. People are talking about it. I want to get your opinions on it. So thank you. Let's go ahead and move on. We were talking about the housing crisis indirectly. Let's talk about it very directly here. In Portland, the housing affordability issue is staggering, frankly. Zillow says the median rent here is about $2,500 a month now. The average single-family home, according to Zillow right now, is valued at $529,000 in Portland. How will you work to ensure that everybody who wants to live and work in Portland can afford to do so? It's a massive problem, Andrew Zara, you were talking about a moment ago. Let's go ahead and pick it up with you.
Thank you, Greg. Housing affordability is a core of why I'm actually running for mayor. There is a lot we can do to tackle our housing crisis. Remember, we got here today because of decades of inaction. So about 15 years is when it really started, 15 years ago. We stopped building enough housing. And as the city, we have a few tools in our toolbox that we can use. The first item that I want to tackle as mayor is rezoning our city. We have a significant amount of land in our city that's not even zoned for housing. So we're in a housing crisis. I believe we need to look at everything we do through the lens of that. The fact that we're in a housing crisis. We have about 4 million square feet of land that's zoned as light and moderate industrial that you can't build housing on in some of the most dense walkable parts of our city along major transportation corridors. So that's an easy first step. We need to prioritize, we need to revisit the way that we are looking at vacancies in our city. Bangor is doing it already with vacancy fees. We need to be creative to get out of this because you're absolutely right. We are losing workers. We have people who work in this city and can't live here. And if we don't change the trajectory that we are on, in the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to be a city similar to San Francisco. We're not going to be able to have people who live here unless they can afford really expensive property. So the good news, like I said, there's a lot that we can do. We just have to think big and swing big when it comes to zoning priorities first.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And Dylan Pugh, we'll send it over to you, please.
Absolutely. I mean, this is absolutely a crisis, so I'm glad we're getting some time to talk about it. And I think there's two elements to it. Obviously, the first is that we do need to build a lot more housing. That's the core thing. And I think there's a couple things in the regulatory environment that we can do immediately that'll help that. The first is looking at the percentage of units that we require to be affordable in a new development. I think we should bump that number up, let's say 50%. Let's start there. And looking at the fee in lieu of structure, that should also be much higher, or we should eliminate it entirely and say, if you're going to build in Portland, you have to build affordable housing. But the thing in this conversation to not miss is that we have to be talking about not just building more, but who's going to own what we build. Because if we build a lot, but we don't alter the fundamental ownership structure of our housing stock, you're still going to have these power imbalances, and 10, 20, 30 years down the line, you're still going to have a crisis. I was looking at an article from 1987, which is from before I was born. They talked about a housing shortage. They talked about a housing crisis. So we need to lead the nation in rates of home ownership. So I want anyone who lives and works in Portland to be able to afford to buy a home if they want, not just rent.
Thank you very much. Mark Dian, same question to you, please.
As mayor, I'd like to end the debate between property owners and tenants. The cycle of referendum after referendum has to stop. We have to develop some common interest. I think one of the initiatives that the city can do is to take a look at zoning in terms of life safety codes so that we can look at what I'm calling zombie commercial space, existing buildings who cannot meet current code expectations to convert into housing. I think that needs to take a look at. The idea of reframing our zoning code may have merits in terms of increasing density in certain parts of the city, but as mayor, I have to be a voice for the neighborhoods. They moved to neighborhoods to preserve the quality and understanding of what those spaces were. They need to be actively engaged in that process to make decisions. They can't see a city hall that brings a new zoning strategy to their neighborhood without having a voice in it. And just one aside to my good colleague, Councilor Zarro. Industrial land has a purpose in the tax scheme of a community. We have industrial zones to solicit business that will help defray the actual cost of taxes as against residential units. So I'm not sure I want to build housing so my kids can play next door to some sort of industrial entity. I think we can look at density. I think traffic corridors make sense, but I want to say again and again, we cannot take that bold step without intentional communication with neighborhoods so they understand where we might go and that they have a voice in that process.
Thank you very much. I'll give Andrew Zarro a chance to respond. In a moment, though, we want to have a chance to hear from everyone first, though. Pius Ali, to you, please.
Thank you very much. Talking about engaging neighbors, I have an idea to create an office of civic engagement or resident engagement. And my good friend on my right was going to help with it. But we will continue working until we're at that office. In terms of housing, I agree with looking at our zonings. How can we use a modern day zoning that will allow for people to live in different parts of the city? I will also issue a 50 million bond. I chaired a Housing and Economic Development Committee. Before I came into this meeting, I had a meeting. In that meeting, there is a co-op model that was presented to us, and we are going to put money into it. I will do a lot of that. Why? Because we're all talking about affordable housing. When individuals get into affordable housing as we have it now, they keep paying, and they keep paying, and they keep paying. When they get into co-op model, they keep paying, but they build equity. At a point when their equity gets to a certain level, they will move and go and build their own or buy their own, and then give that space to someone else who needs to move in. Those are some of the things that I will do. In addition to, I agree with my colleagues that we need to look our, how do we call it, our zoning laws and make sure that it's updated to a modern day zoning that will allow for housing to be built. I have more on that on my website. So if you want to hear more, please go to my website and read about my housing policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Justin Costa, we want to hear from you too, please.
Yeah, thank you. Housing affordability is the single biggest issue. I think it's an existential issue for the community of Portland, and if we don't address it, we're not going to be the same community or anything like it in the very near future. So I think the core issue here for me is what we really need is action. And, most of us know each other here. I mean, we've known each other for years. I haven't worked directly with Mark and Andrew. I don't mean to be particularly negative or everything, but we have 3 members of the city council who are here right now, and any city councilor could have introduced any of these zoning proposals at any time in their term. And the problem is that housing isn't quick. Even the fastest thing that we do now is not going to affect anyone's housing. It's not going to get built and occupied for a number of years. So every time that we delay, that we let the perfect be the enemy of the good, we're really doing a tremendous harm. The amount of money that is the amount of money and the amount of units that are flowing through our housing channels right now that are in the so-called pipeline, being proposed new projects, is down significantly in the last few years. And we're not seeing a firm response. What we should do is not open up wide-ranging conversations that are going to implicate the neighborhood concerns that Mark legitimately references, are not going to implicate these bigger things, but are going to be easy and actionable. We should give nonprofit affordable housing nonprofit affordable housing developers the tools that they need to make units more affordable by giving them greater density. And we should simply break the logjam by tying those to affordability restrictions. There are a number of concrete things that you can look at on my website, justincosta.org, for, but we need to just move forward so that we can start making progress while we tee up any broader conversations that people legitimately want to have. But we need the momentum starting now to generate more housing.
I know that Mike Shepard has a follow-up he wants to ask, but first we have a couple of redirects I want to get to. Andrew Zarro, I think I promised you a moment ago. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Greg. And I have a couple of redirects, it sounds like. So the first thing I just want to say to Justin Costa is every single year I've been on the council, I've advocated for the mayor to appoint a recode committee because we're going through a recode process right now of rezoning the city, and every single year the mayor has not appointed that. As mayor, I will appoint a committee of the council to oversee our zoning policies. But realistically, we are in a housing crisis. We need to build about 12,000 units in the next 10 years if we're going to get out of this thing. And so that means being creative. The comprehensive plan that last was worked on in 2017, I believe that's when you were on the city council, said that for the next 10 years we needed about 2,500 units of housing. Well, we're a few years later and clearly that's not doing it. So we do need to think big. And I have no intention, I live in District 4, I live in Back Cove. I absolutely love the character of my neighborhood. On my street we have single family homes and we have multis, and it's okay. I think most Portlanders are not going to walk around the off-peninsula districts and tell the difference between an R3 and an R5, other than that the lot is a little different. In no way, shape, or form am I advocating for changing the character of any neighborhood. The question is, how do we grow while keeping what we love about the place? We have a dense downtown with lots of vacant parking lots, and we have to do something about it, and that is the smartest place to start. Last thing I'll say, we are in a housing crisis. We are not in an industrial use crisis. And last time I checked, East Bayside is covered with breweries and coffee roasters, and I think it would be pretty cool to live over there, so I don't see why we can't have housing zoned over there.
Fair enough. Mark Diana, redirect to you as well, please.
I was just going to comment about Justin. You know, we've done a lot. We've increased 400 plus new units this year alone. One of the trends that people haven't paid attention to is we now have deed restricted properties where a city manages and oversees rent behavior in those units. So if people are getting into the right type of environment, we're there to ensure that they stay there. You know the council, what do we have? We have 22 some odd meetings a year, half as many committee meetings, yet we're being asked to solve a national economic issue of housing. We can do our part. I'm glad you've moved away from expressly saying industrial zones and you're going to tuck it in with the breweries. I guess that's an acceptable industrial zone. But we got to be real. I hear the number 12,000. I'll be honest. I would tell my constituents that's not a real number. I don't know where you put 12,000 in the city of Portland. Now, if you're talking about taking a leadership role with the Metro Coalition to put 12,000 in Greater Portland, that might be an achievable goal. But to characterize that, once again, Portland by itself will solve the greatest problem of the day.
Right, I got to cut you off right there. 20 seconds, Andrew Zarr, you wanted to respond.
The city of Portland's population was at its greatest in the mid-20th century. We were about 12,000, just shy of that, greater than we are today. And policies, decades after decade, removed housing from our city. It removed an entire neighborhood that Franklin Arterial cuts through. This isn't a radical idea. This is restoring the city to what it once was and looking towards a future that requires more housing. People want to live here. They want to open a business here. They want to afford it. So I don't think it's a crazy idea. I think it's actually common sense and reasonable.
All right, fair enough. You know what? I'm going to do something right now. I see a bunch of hands up. I'm going to give each of you like 20 more seconds to answer this. Let's start, and we'll go right down the line, then we're going to move on. Dylan Pugh. And actually, Andrew Zarr, I think you just had your last word, if I may say so. Dylan Pugh, please.
Thanks. Just one thing I want to add that's not being talked about is we need to think about alternative building technologies. There are some really innovative things being done at the University of Maine Advanced Composites Lab. So one way to break the logjam is to think about how we can build houses more quickly and that are also more sustainable.
Mark Dion.
You're referring to the Franklin Street Arterial. I pushed on that issue. I mean, it sounds great. I love great, okay? But when you ask the price tag, it's $28 million to prepare a platform for future housing development. And when I push on that issue as to who's going to pick up the tab, it's unclear. Maybe we'll have city, state, and federal money. I think voters need to understand that any proposal has a price tag, and we need to be clear about that. Thank you.
ISLE, please.
I was going to say that all the things that we are talking about here, most of the time is aspirational because of the way our system is set. But it's something that is practical. It doesn't matter how many houses we want to build or how we want to build those houses. We are in a crisis of not having people who know how to build. When I was on the school board, I'm a friend of Portland Technology High School. And I will make sure that more young people and more people, not just young people, individuals who want to go back into the workforce have gone there and learned how to build. When I was canvassing, I've run into a lot of people who are carpenters and masoners who are saying that we don't have people. You can put how many housing you want to build on paper until you have those who want to build. We cannot build it. So as we're having this aspirational conversation or discussion or debate on how many houses we're going to build, we should also think of who is going to build them.
Fair enough.
So I will add that to the conversation.
Justin Costa, final word on this, please, and we'll move on.
Yeah, I will just say I think there's plenty of good ideas being thrown around here, but you can see that this generates debate. So start with the stuff that we can do right away. Give affordable housing developers the tools to make it easier on the Brighton Avenue corridor, the Forest Avenue corridor, and area around Morrow's Corner, the long-discussed priority corridors for the city. That will start the wheels of progress moving. That's what we should do because we need to make progress on this.
All right, let's get to our lightning round. I'm going to steal Mike Shepard. I know had a follow-up involving building and development, so I'm going to ask his question as part of our lightning round. The lightning round is a series of quick questions designed to elicit quick answers, yes or no, hopefully, very brief. We'll go left to right, right to left. We'll try to get to as much as we can in the few minutes here that we have. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to ask Mike's first question. As we talk about development, we're just about to come online. One of the, I believe the tallest building in Maine is about to be finished on Congress Street. Do you support building up as a solution to the density and housing issue? Let's start with Dylan Pugh. Yes or no, build up more?
Yes to a limit.
Mark
Yes.
Dion. Yes.
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 Next question. The Portland minimum wage, it's going to rise from $14 to $15 an hour on January 1st. Do you support raising it further beyond just COLA adjustments? Andrew Zara.
Yes.
In time, yes.
Yes.
Sully.
No.
Yes.
Next question. Since Governor Mills declared a state of emergency around what was Hurricane Lee, workers got a minimum that hazard pay of $21 an hour. I know there was some pushback from some community members in the business community. Would you support revisiting that as wages continue to increase? The hazard pay ordinance, specifically Dylan Pugh.
Yes.
Mark
Yes.
Dion.
Yes.
Sully.
Yes.
Justin Costa.
Yes.
And Zara. All right. Right now, the City Council can't change citizens' initiatives that are passed by voters for 5 years. Should that time frame be shorter? Andrew Zara.
Yes.
Justin
Yes.
Costa. Nicely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
Which Portland restaurant do you enjoy the most? Let's put you on the spot. Dylan Pugh.
Nora Falafel.
Mark Dion.
Yosaku.
Sully.
Buddha.
I have to say my brother-in-law's restaurant regards.
Got to keep it in the family. Andrew Zara.
What's your brother? Mize.
And last but not least, what's the last concert or show that you went to in Portland? Andrew Zara. If you can recall.
Allison Krauss and Robert Plant.
All right. Justin Costa.
Oh, it's been a little bit. I had a 2-year-old Lake Street Dive a few summers ago.
ISLE.
I haven't gone to any concert recently. The last time I went to a concert was so many years ago. I don't even remember what band it was.
Mark Dion.
God, I'm going to date myself. ZZ Top.
There you go. Dylan Pugh.
I saw a rapper named John Wayne at the Space Gallery.
All right, thank you so much. That's the lightning round. Let's go ahead and move to closing statements. Since we're online, we've got a little wiggle room. I think we're really up against the 8 o'clock hour, but that's fine. We're online. We're not up against the television restraints. So let's go to closing statements. Based on our random drawing, we're going to go in order, left to right. Each one will have 1 minute to respond. Let's begin with Dylan Pugh. Your chance for a closing statement tonight, please.
Thank you. And thank you, guys. This was actually kind of fun, so it's good to be up here. And we're obviously only scratching the surface here. But what I hope this has given you is a general idea about how I approach solving all problems. And that is to go to the root of the issue, to lean in with compassion, and to focus on returning power and agency to the people. Because we have a really important question that we have to ask ourselves. And that's, how do we want to live with one another? And what I see is that we need a really urgent change. We're going to have a lot of really difficult conversations and really hear each other. And that's not easy. Empathy and compassionate conversations changed my life. And I know that if we bring this process to the city and we have these conversations together, that can have a transformational effect on our communities. And it would be my honor to walk that path with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dylan Pugh. Mark Dion, you have 1 minute, please, for a closing statement.
I've spent over 4 decades in public service, and the foundation of all my work and the variety of roles in which I've served has been to value relationships. If you value relationships, you build trust. And if you have trust, then your constituents can respect your decisions, even when you make a hard one, a difficult one. They might not always agree, but they can trust that I stayed to a process and acted in their best interest. I want to thank you for listening or watching it online. My name is Mark Dion. I'm asking you for your vote on November 7th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pius Ali, floor is yours.
Thank you. I started by sharing my immigrant story. I came to New York. 2 years later, I ended up in Portland. As I celebrate my immigration story this month, I want to look at you, Portland, and give you a great thanks for giving me the opportunity. You helped me build my leadership skills, and you keep voting for me every year. I appreciate that. I don't take the leadership responsibilities that you put in my hands lightly. I will continue to lead in the best way that I know, which is collaborative leadership. Leadership that listens to everyone, leadership that is able to bring people together in times that you need that leader. And I'm looking forward to continuously working with you. I hope on November 7th, when you go to the ballot, my name is going to be on the top. It doesn't need any effort. Just check it and get me there. Thank you for your support over the years. I'm looking forward to continuously and collaboratively working with you to make our city what it can possibly be. Because right now, we are at a spot that we don't have to stay there longer. And I'm ready to work with you. That's why I had all my shirts folded. I'm ready to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Justin Costa, you have a chance for closing statements, please.
Yeah, thank you to all the candidates for running, for participating. Thank you all to all the viewers for watching this evening. Again, for me, public service has been a tremendous honor. It's been the most rewarding experience of my life to be able to serve on the city council and on the school board before that. As I started by saying, I'm running again because I see the city struggling to deal with a number of really complex issues right now. There has been far more said this evening that we agree on than that we disagree on. It is important to mention that. There are sure quibbles around the edges and things like that, but we are all fundamentally trying to move in the right direction. I think the question for every voter should be, who is actually going to get us there? We're all talking about affordable housing. We're all talking about homelessness. We're all talking about the same constellation of issues, although I will note that we haven't spent a single second on the school department this evening and education. But we're all trying to move in the right direction. We are struggling to get there right now, and with all due respect, I think if we rely on the same folks who are there right now trying to manage the same set of relationships that exist on the council right now, we should expect the same results that we're seeing right now. If that works for you, you have 3 really good people to choose from. If, like me, you think that we need a change, we need someone new in that relationship who has the experience of getting things done to move things forward, then I ask for your vote in November.
Thank you very much. And based on our random drawing, Andrew Zarro, you have the final word for closing statement.
I'm used to it, the last name that has a Z in it. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, all of you. This was actually really wonderful, and anyone who raises their hand to serve the public has a lot of my respect. I want to remind the voters of Portland the crossroads that we're at. We have 2 options in front of us, and the choice is clear for me. But we can either embrace progress, unity, and sustainable growth, or we could risk doing what we're doing now and rely on bad ideas and antiquated policies. As your mayor, I promise that I will champion collaboration, innovation, and the well-being of every Portlander. I want us to be proud of our city, and I want us to bring everyone along as we're looking towards a more prosperous Portland. My campaign is not just a wish list. It's a promise to the people of Portland. It's a promise to take on our greatest challenges, and it's a promise to meet the moment. Now, I represent a new generation of leadership, and I know that can be scary. But I'm asking you to trust me as we walk this path forward till tomorrow. So, thank you for listening to us, and I humbly ask that in November, you rank me as your first choice. Thanks.
Thank you very much to Andrew Zarro and all the participants in our debate tonight. That's going to do it. A big thanks, I got to say, to Mike Shepard from the Bangor Daily News. He sort of got cut out by the flow of the debate here in the second half here, but he put a lot of work into preparation here and helped me get ready for it as well. So a huge thanks to Mike Shepard again, the political editor of the Bangor Daily News. If you'd like to watch this again, you can scan the QR code that we do have for you to scan it and watch. Well, obviously, if you're watching us right now, it's because you're watching online. So you can continue to watch us online. Feel free to share it with your friends as well. Rewatch it if you wish, if there's a part you want to see again. And again, you can go to all the candidates' websites. And as always, right now through Election Day, November 7th, go to WGME.com, BangorDailyNews.com to find out more. Huge thanks to you, the viewers. Huge thanks to the candidates as well. Have a great night, everybody.